The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
Welcome to Marvelous Disney, the podcast that discusses the most recent doings at one of the more dynamic divisions of the Walt Disney Company, which is, of course, Marvel Entertainment. This is entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host, the amazing Aaron Adams, and I are recording this week's episode on Wednesday, June 28th, 2023. And earlier today, you got to view episode 2 of Secret Invasion, right?
Absolutely. Yep. That was one of the very first things on the agenda this morning.
Okay, we will discuss that at length, folks. But first, you wanted to share some news in regard to Fall Out Boy, right?
Yeah, I was just scrolling through Twitter and Fall Out Boy was trending, so I wondered what's up with that. You know, it's kind of weird for a band to trend out of the blue sometimes. So it turns out they did a cover of Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire." And I'm a fan of that song to begin with, so, you know, Fall Out Boy covers that. Well, I got to hear what they do. And the thing is, they've updated all the lyrics. Like, since Billy Joel has done the original, a lot of news events have happened throughout time, up until today. So they've updated all of the tragedy lyrics of We Didn't Start the Fire. However, we got a Marvel drop in it. And I was like, oh my goodness. So we're going to take a quick listen. It goes fast, but it comes towards the very end. Here we go.
Okay.
Twilight, Michael Jackson dies, nuclear accident, Fukushima, Japan, Crimean Peninsula, Cambridge Analytica, Kim Jong-un, Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man.
Okay.
That's great. I was just thrilled that we got a little name drop for Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man kicking off the MCU. That's noteworthy. I think that's a bullet point worth adding.
Oh, no, definitely. But I got to check this out because I was a fan. I mean, I've been a Billy Joel fan forever. But when the original We Didn't Start the Fire dropped back in '89 for somebody covering the Walt Disney Company, the Disneyland reference in there was fun. So, yeah, going to be interested to see how they updated this. And more to the point, I would love to have heard the conversation with Mr. Joel about, we'd like to do this, and how they sorted that out.
You know, I think some musicians, and I think Billy Joel as well, they get flattered. You know, that you always have the self-doubt. You know, why are all these people at this concert here to see me for? I heard him say stuff like that about his big shows. And when someone says, hey, I love your music, I'd love to cover your song, they're like, really? Little old me, Billy Joel? You know, and they're like, yes, really. You know, the millions of people adore you. Face it, man. And they just kind of get sucked into the whole, wow, yeah, I would love to hear another person do a riff on my work. So, yeah, I'm sure it went very smoothly. Or there was a lot of cash involved, in which case it went very smoothly.
Okay, now, speaking of a million, it would be nice to report that last week's premiere of Secret Invasion got viewed by 1 million households in the U.S. That didn't happen. In fact, came close. It was 994,000 households in the U.S. viewed the first episode of Secret Invasion in the first 5 days of it being available on Disney+. To put that in perspective, Aaron, when Loki premiered on Disney+ back in June of 2021, that premiere episode was viewed 2.5 million times during its first 5 days that it was available on streaming service. Jump to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which very first limited series. That was March of 2019. Likewise, Moon Knight, which debuted on Disney Plus back in March of 2022. Both of those, the premiere episodes, were viewed 1.5 million households in the U.S. within the first 5 days. WandaVision gets viewed 1.6 million times. Hawkeye and She-Hulk get viewed 1.5 million. Only Ms. Marvel did less well on its premiere on Disney Plus. It only had 775,000, households tuning in for its premiere. And Not entirely sure what's going on here. If you remember back in the day, Ms. Marvel, they sort of attributed its rough start to, there's that subset of fans that, well, it's a female superhero and I'm not going to watch it. Brr, 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 brr. And I guess for me, given that people have loved Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury since we were just talking about the initial Robert Downey Iron Man back in 2008. I'm just kind of startled that it's off to a somewhat slow start there. And
one question, I remember early on when they were launching WandaVision, there seemed to be a whole lot of advertising for that because that was also the launch time of Disney Plus as well. The early days. So they had a large advertising push during that time. I have not watched a lot of terrestrial television in a long time, so I could be missing the ads. But do you know, are they even advertising the fact that Secret Invasion came out? Because, I do a show with you about this stuff, and I didn't even know it was happening until you're like, oh, by the way, we're going to do Mud on a Wednesday because Secret Invasion comes out on Wednesday. And I was like, oh, really? Because it was so far off my radar. I'm still thinking it was like in August for some reason, and it's like right here in front of us. So yeah, are they letting anybody know, or are they hiding their light under a bushel?
I want to say yes. I know I have seen some ads that push virtually everything that Disney Plus is showing this summer.
Oh, okay.
And Nick Fury is prominently featured in those ads. But yeah, I don't know what to tell you there.
It's one thing to say, hey, coming up this summer, we've got Secret Wars and we've got Ahsoka and we've got X, Y, and Z. But do they actually have a date stamped under those images? Or are they just saying, hey, coming up in the future? And I think one thing from my radio days was very, very important was appointment setting. Where I would be doing my afternoon show and I would say, hey, listen to the morning show at 7:15 for your chance to win $10,000 with the birthday game. And people would then tune in at 7:15 the next morning to win that money, or try to. And that's important, and it's called appointment setting. And I just don't think Disney's doing enough appointment setting of, hey, mark this on your calendar, we've got something special for you that day.
To bury the needle in the complete opposite direction, instead of something that appears to be underperforming, if we pivot now to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, that's been out in theaters for only 26 days at this point and shows absolutely no sign of fading. In fact, this past weekend, that Sony Pictures Animation production was number one at the box office again. It sold $19 million worth of tickets and actually bested Pixar's Elemental at the box office. And just to sort of put this in perspective, folks, current box office totals for Across the Spider-Verse, $319 million domestic, $243 overseas. That's a worldwide box office total of $563 million. And remember, the original animated Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse, was out in theaters in late 2018, early 2019, over its entire box office run. $190 million in North America, $194 overseas, worldwide eventual box office total of $384 million. So Across the Spider-Verse has already done 146% of the business that Into the Spider-Verse did, again, back in 2018, 2019, over its entire box office run. And again, they've gotten to that number in only 26 days, which is extraordinary. By the way, we'll have more Across the Spider-Verse news in a sec, but first want to remind you that Marvelous Disney is brought to you by Storybook Destination, trusted travel partner of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. For a worry-free travel experience every time, please book online at StorybookDestination.com. Back to Across the Spider-Verse now, because not all of this week's news associated with that Sony Pictures Animation production has been positive. Did you see the story in Vulture?
The one where Amy Pascal was telling him to suck it up? You bunch of little crybabies. Do your job.
Okay, not in so many words, but all right. But technically you're not wrong. Okay. What we're talking about here, folks, is a story posted on Vulture, shined a not-so-flattering spotlight on the working conditions at the artists and animators who created Into the Spider-Verse sequel had to deal with. And again, I have friends who work in animation, even by what people normally deal with when working on an animated feature. This sounded kind of brutal. The allegations in the Vulture article are 11-hour days, 7 days a week for a solid year. And all of this was supposedly because of this film's producer, Phil Lord. He allegedly wasted 3 to 6 months of production time because he couldn't decide what, Across the Spider-Verse should look like. And we're pulling the quotes from this Vulture piece, which shares quotes from a Across the Spider-Verse production member who calls himself Steven. And Steven goes on to say that over 100 people left this production because they couldn't take it anymore. But a lot stayed so they could make sure that their work survived until the end, because if it gets changed, it's no longer yours. And I know people who were on the project for over a year who left, and now they have little to show for it because everything was changed. They went through the hell of the production and then got none of their work coming out the other side. Now, what's especially concerning about this Vulture story is, remember how Across the Spider-Verse was originally supposed to come out in theaters in April of 2022, but then got its release date pushed back twice, eventually arriving on June 2nd, 2023. The official explanation, Aaron, is that Across the Spider-Verse's delayed release date was due to pandemic-related production problems. But according to at least 4 members of the production team of this Into the Spider-Verse sequel who spoke to Vulture, the real reason that Across the Spider-Verse missed those 2 earlier release dates was because Phil Lord reportedly kept changing his plans for this movie. Now, this gets especially concerning when this article in Vulture then pivots to talking about Beyond the Spider-Verse, the 3rd installment of this animated Spider-Man trilogy, which is supposed to arrive in theaters next year on March 29, 2024. Quoting from Steven here, and again, that's that production team who, one of the main sources of the piece in Vulture. And Steven says, there's no way that movie's coming out then. There's been progress on the pre-production side of things, but as for how the production side goes, the only progress that's been made on the 3rd film is exploration of the tests that were done prior to this movie being split into 2 parts. So Lord's creative process in this Vulture article is likened to a guy who is trying to get a bunch of construction workers to make a building without a blueprint. Now, to get to what Aaron brought up, after the story ran in Vulture, Amy Pascal, who is the producer of Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse and a longtime Sony Pictures executive, she came to Phil Lord's defense, saying, one of the things about animation that makes it such a wonderful thing to work on is you get to keep going until the story is right. And if the story isn't right, you have to keep going until it is. And as part of this statement, Pascal did admit that major changes had been made to Across the Spider-Verse's narrative and visuals over the course of production. But as for those 100 artists and animators who ultimately chose to walk away from this Into the Spider-Verse sequel rather than continue to deal with those 11-hour days, 7 days a week for over the course of a full year, Amy, as Aaron suggests, didn't sound very sympathetic. Here's what she said in response to that claim in the Vulture story. It's like, welcome to making a movie, I guess? Trifle harsh, don't you think, Mr. Adams? Or
to an extent. There's I think she had said, well, we made changes late in Spider-Man movies and nobody, everyone sucked it up then and did their job or whatever. It's not a direct quote, but the general idea. And it's like, yeah, but that's just put 3 dudes in a suit, get a camera guy, film for 5 minutes, everybody goes home. Not reanimate by hand, 7 minutes of footage. That's completely different. And I don't think that's a fair equation. So in that aspect, I would come to the artist's defense and tell Amy, boo to you for that. And then when it comes to, like Phil Lord couldn't make up his mind on the look or whatever. And I get that because he wants to have a different vibe for every universe that they encounter. And now that they're getting into the third one, it's like, well, look, man, you've already had Miles' world established from the first movie. You've now got Gwen's universe established. You've got, an idea of what Spider-Punk is all about. You've got all these other characters, the Indian Spider-Man. We've established looks for a lot of things. So that hard work should be over. I get you're going to go to new places, right? So fine, we'll have a couple new looks. But if you revisit places, that should all be done now. So I think that process should be a bit better for the third one. And as long as the writing's done, the script doesn't change dramatically. But then again, you said that Haley, was it Steinfeld? She had said that they were, doing voice work up till a few weeks before it was actually released. And it's like, well, how the hell do the animators deal with that? Seriously? How do you correct whatever is done, or are you just trying to lip sync to old animated footage that's already been done?
I do not know what to tell you here. And again, I want to be supportive. I mean, based on what just happened this past weekend at the North American box sets, people seem to love the final product here, which seems to have been the result of a clearly chaotic creative process.
Yeah, so does that actually validate everybody like Phil Lord and Amy Pascal? Like, hey, look, we're coming out on top. We made a #1 movie. Everybody loves it. Doesn't that say we're in the right to push a little bit harder for that victory?
I don't know what to tell you here. I mean, what's interesting to me is I can't help but think back to the summer of 2017, where, remember, we were 4 months into production of Solo, a Star Wars story, which was being co-directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. And 4 months in, Kathleen Kennedy steps in and removes those two as the director of Solo, and then brings in Ron Howard to finish the film. And again, there's been all sorts of reporting about what reportedly went on behind the scenes on that film. And what's interesting is there was a lot of talk about how they had the script that Lawrence and John Kasdan had written for the film, but Lord and Miller were departing from the script and shooting a lot of alternative takes and that sort of thing, trying to settle on a tone for the film. And ultimately, Kathleen had to step in kind of as the grown-up and like, no. We have to shoot what's on the page. And thank you, guys. We're going to go with somebody else. So
I don't know. I'm in favor of that style. I mean, Marvel does that all the time. They do something and they go, that's not quite right. The whole Robert Downey Jr. Stark thing at the very end of Endgame, where they call them back for that "and I am Iron Man" line. I mean, there are times where you think on the page, oh, we got it. Oh, this is brilliant. And then you look at the footage and you go, could be stronger. Not quite sure how. Mull it over a little bit. I got it. And I am Iron Man. Okay, call in Robert. We got to do this again. So, if you're doing something as big as Star Wars, yeah, I would want 3 or 4 extra takes as well. Because if you get back into the editing suite and it just kind of falls flat, now I got to go back out and recut or reshoot and then get back in the studio. Whereas now it's like, no, it's okay. I've got 3 extra punchlines for this. Let's try them out.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of months if what Steven says comes to pass, to the effect of, will we see Beyond the Spider-Verse's release date pushed out past March 29, 2024? But at the same time, I don't want to be completely negative about what the folks at Sony Pictures Animation are up to. So to pivot to a happier Spider-Man related topic, that live in concert version of Into the Spider-Verse continues to chug around the country. We've got dates now for, August 26th of this year. It's going to be presented at the River Center Performing Arts Center in Columbus, Georgia. Then August 27th, it moves to Jacksonville, Florida, where it'll be presented at the Jacksonville Center of the Performing Arts. August 29th will be staged at the Ruth Eckert Hall in Clearwater, Florida. And finally, on August 30th, this live concert will be presented in Orlando at the Walt Disney Theater at the Dr. Phillips Center, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is located just behind Universal Studios Islands of Adventure, which means if you're a really ambitious Marvel fan, you can first spend your day in that park exploring Marvel Superhero Island, and then that same evening, head on over to Dr. Phillips and watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse live in concert. Now, I have two opportunities to see this thing. There's October 1st, when I'd have to drive down to Wallingford, Connecticut to see it at the Toyota Oakdale Theater. But I'm actually kind of leaning toward later in that same week on October 7th, when Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse live in concert will be presented at the Emerson Colonial Theater in Boston, which is this beautiful old Broadway house where a lot of classic musicals that were, when they were trying out, when they'd go out of town, that this is where they'd come. I want to say back in the day, like in the 40s, this is where Oklahoma debuted. So, by the way, folks, if you're interested in also checking out Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse live in concert, head on over to the official Spider-Verse in Concert website, spiderverseinconcert.com. Speaking of music-related stuff, Rogers the Musical opens at Disney California Adventure on the very same day, Aaron, that this show is supposed to be posted online. That's Friday, June 30th. This is described as a short one-act musical. This live stage presentation will be staged inside of the Hyperion Theater, which is located in the Hollywood Land section of that theme park. 30-minute long show presented Tuesday through Saturday most weeks this summer. Right now, the plan is that it will close on August 31st, though I've been told by folks at the parks that it might be extended if the public reaction to this new live stage show is what Disney hopes it will be. And of course, Disney being Disney, they had to figure out a new revenue stream that could be attached to Rogers the Musical. So that's why Disney is now selling Rogers the Musical, the premium viewing experience.
Oh, I thought it was going to be a popcorn bucket.
Well, actually, there is a popcorn bucket involved, Eric.
Oh, okay. All right.
If you give Disneyland Resort $29 for every member of your party, you get to check into Stage 12. That's located in DCA next to Monsters, Inc., Mike and Sully to the Rescue, where you'll find a reserved seat waiting for you in the pre-show lounge. And this is where you will be gifted your free Rogers the Musical red, white, and blue popcorn bucket, along with a Coca-Cola beverage of your choice. There'll also be some sort of Rogers the Musical photo op located inside of Stage 12. And when it's your scheduled showtime for Rogers the Musical approaches, you'll then move from Stage 12 over to the Hyperion Theater, where you'll be among the first to gain access to this theater and pick out a primo seat. On the other hand, if you don't opt to do the premium viewing experience, California Adventure is going to set up a virtual queue for this live show. You're going to have to use the Disneyland app to get access to it. The virtual queue will open every day at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time for the first two shows of the day. Those are scheduled for 12:30 and 2 p.m. The virtual queue will then reopen again at 2 p.m., which will then allow guests to book seats or gain access, to the final two performances of the day, which will be presented at 4 p.m. and 5:30. Not sure if I'm going to make it out to L.A. this summer to get to see Rogers the Musical in person. If any Marvelous Disney listeners do, especially if some of you folks make it to the opening weekend, Aaron and I would love to hear your impressions of the show. I mean, mind you, I did get to at least see the Save the City number performed live on stage last year. It was presented in Hall D23 as part of the Disney Studios presentation at the D23 Expo last August. I have to say it was loud and long, and
what a beautiful way to describe a musical performance. It was loud and it was long and I wanted to go home.
Well, but if you remember Jeremy Renner in Hawkeye, when he took his family to go see Rogers the Musical on Broadway, and Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman wrote basically a parody song number.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's a parody. It's not supposed to be good. It's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be so bad it reverts back into being good out of its badness. But loud and, anybody can be loud. And, long, well, the old saying that wit is the art of brevity. So if it's long, it's like, well, that's not good either.
But again, let's see what they do in the Hyperion Theater. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this. One final note here before we head into our break. Anyone who listens to the show regularly knows that I collect the art of books for the MCU, and want to remind folks that the art of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse book, as opposed to what's been going on with the MCU books where they show up months, if not years later, this one's actually coming out on Monday, July 3rd. And I have to tell you, I'm going to be very interested to read what Phil Lord has to say about this animated feature in this book, because I don't think they anticipated, the artists and the animators, getting as upfront about the working conditions as they were. So it's going to be interesting to see what Mr. Lord said, not knowing that this controversy was going to erupt after, Across the Spider-Verse was out in theaters. But anyway, Aaron and I will be back in a sec to talk about Secret Invasion. But first, this.
Every story you love, every invention that moves you, every idea you wished was yours, all began as nothing. Just a blank page with a blinking cursor, asking a simple question. What do you see? Great ideas start on Mac. Find out more on apple.com/Mac.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
Hey, the vibes are slipping. I think it's time to bring out the Velveeta shells and cheese. The holidays are a time to go all in on indulgence. Headline your meals with the rich, creamy meltiness of Velveeta shells and cheese and satisfy your holiday cravings like no other. Bring that main course energy to your side dish. Celebrate extra with Velveeta these holidays.
As Aaron and I usually do in Marvelous Disney, we spend a few moments to sort of talk about the DC-related news of the week. And we were just talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, how it came out on top at the box office this past weekend after 3 weeks in theaters. The Flash, on the other hand, fading fast at the box office. It was third in North America. Sold $15 million worth of tickets. That put it behind Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse as well as Pixar's Elemental. And Aaron, you were mentioning that we had a listener reach out via Twitter and really sort of drill down into the numbers here. And it's not good news, right?
No. They had, let's see here. So just going to quote the stuff here so I get his words correct. The Flash finally crossed 200 million globally after grossing 26.6 million on second weekend overseas over, is it 86? No, 68 markets. Down 64.5% from opening weekend. And then, not to mention, apart from the expensive promo campaign, The Flash still has a $190 million budget price tag. So the film may easily lose more than $200 million for Warner Brothers when all is said and done. Oof. Between the cost of the budget, the cost of the advertising campaign, and then the lackluster turnout. So now the question is, because we've got projects coming up like Blue Beetle for DC, which I've never heard about, never cared about, and probably you couldn't pay me to go into a theater and watch it. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, I had fun with the first one, but I don't think I would buy a ticket to go into a theater to see that either. So the question is, with these remaining, I don't want to call them leftovers because that's demeaning to the product, but James Gunn's got a reboot coming, right? So we're gonna have a clean slate, so to speak, with the exception apparently Aquaman is still going to be played by Jason Momoa in the future, I guess. But whatever the case may be, if we're going to have a clean slate, and you've got someone like David Zaslav who is cutting budgets and cutting content. And this actually kind of goes to show why maybe shelving Batgirl wasn't the worst idea ever. Because I don't know the name of the actress. She wasn't like a Margot Robbie type super huge name. And she may be a wonderful actress. I'm not aware of her name. That's it. But she's the star. And Batgirl is not as big of a character as Superman or Batman. So you've got a lower audience there. And if it had a pretty decent sized budget and you're going to have a decent sized advertising campaign, that can look like a loss from far away, especially if The Flash is doing that exact same thing right now. So, you take in the Zaslav factor of cut budgets, cut content, merging HBO and making it Max and all that stuff. And then you take things like The Flash, which everybody seems to really like the character. But they just didn't turn out for the movie. So what happens to the budgets in the future when James Gunn wants to relaunch? And he's like, I would like $500 million, please. And they're like, no, go to hell. You have $100 million. And he's like, oh, I can't make it quite as flashy as I was hoping to. And very similarly, if we look at the Disney side, Bob Iger asking Kevin Feige, slow down with the money, man. Either less shows or lower budgets and things like that. So what's going to happen by the time we get to Secret Wars, where it's like, we didn't put anything on the screen. Shh, it's a secret. There's just no money left. What's happening?
If the folks at Marvel do their job, and remember, when we built up to Infinity War and then Endgame, a lot of the reason we as an audience, we as fans of the MCU, turned out because we had put in the time, we had put in the sweat equity. We wanted to see all of these characters in one film and, see what they would do together. So that's the thing I think with the Kang Dynasty and Secret War is that I think looking at those two projects, they will do the business. Now, will they do Endgame business? Will they do Infinity War business? I don't know what to tell you.
God forbid if they do like Ant-Man business. Like Ant-Man did well for an Ant-Man movie.
Yep.
But it was not the culmination of everything like an Endgame was. So it's like you have to have the appropriate expectations. And I think you're right. Kang and Secret Wars will do gangbusters because those are the big pinnacle tentpole events. But Thor, Love and Thunder, did that crack the world open, or did it just kind of, do okay? It did okay for a Thor movie, And that's the thing is, if Iger's looking at things and he's like, oh, is this one of those, it did okay for an Ant-Man movie, well, then you get just it'll do okay for a budget as a response. And I think we're going to see some tightening of the reins. Now, what does that mean? That, we spoke a while ago about the imbalance between what Robert Downey Jr. got paid versus what any of the female actresses get paid. And we agree that there's an imbalance, but I also think, maybe Robert shouldn't get all that money. If that's where the balance is out of whack, maybe it's that he was getting too much. Obviously, the writers' strike, they need more money. Maybe instead of Robert getting that money, that it goes to the writers. Maybe it goes to the caterers. Maybe it goes to the costume. Maybe it goes to the set design. But, if there's an imbalance, and so I think there's going to be a pretty big shakeup in where the financial, what they consider as a success is going to change, and what people get paid is going to change, and some stars will make less and other people will make more. And I hope we get to a balance.
I hope so as well. But the math out in Hollywood and the whole notion of this, we've educated an audience. The folks that did not go out to the theaters to see The Flash know that later this summer they can sit at home and fire up Max and watch The Flash and see what they missed. And there are so many films just in my lifetime, whether it's things like The Rocketeer that died a dog's death when it went out in theaters in 1990, but then got rediscovered and then became beloved, and this whole notion of, The Flash is a failure, and it's like, hang on, wait 5 to 10 years and let's
Right.
circle back to this.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing with movies is the whole notion of, yes, that's what it earned at the box office when it was initially released, but you can't count on something like, for example, A Christmas Story, which only became the beloved phenomena that it is today because, 5 and 6 years after it ran in theaters, I want to say it was TBS that somebody there decided, we'll run this for 24 hours in a row. Let's see what happens.
Right.
In fact, I've been listening lately to Karina Longworth's wonderful You Must Remember This, and she's just recently done an episode on Showgirls, which back in 1994, when it was first released to theaters, was, people would point to it at that's a piece of crap. That's an example of Hollywood excess. And now, years later, everybody's like, oh, that's camp and that's fun. And look at the great production values and the amazing performances. And it's sort of like, so yeah, the whole notion of, oh my God, Flash is a disaster. And it's just like, okay, let's put a pin in this and come back in 10 years, and see what people have to say. Toward that end, though, because we're talking budget and that sort of thing, you had to see the stories this past week about Comic-Con, about, Marvel's not going. In fact, there were so many of the big studios and that sort of thing that are now pulled out of the event. What's your thought there? Is that budget? Is it the writer's strike? Why are they pulling out?
If they're trimming budgets and they're looking on where can we save money, a lot of that goes into promotion because promotion is all of the sizzle, right? The steak is the movie, but the advertising is the sizzle. And there's a lot of flash that goes into that, and flash equals money. So, you're probably on the nose with it. They're just trying to trim budgets, or their project isn't far along enough or in a good enough state where they can show it off comfortably. They want some more time to let it bake in the oven before they let the public see it. There's any number of reasons, but I think budget could be a big part of it.
I get that. And speaking of promotion, I don't know if you've seen the trailer for My Adventures with Superman, the new animated series.
No, not yet.
From Warner Bros. Animation. Oh my God, it looks great. And that debuts this coming Thursday, July 6th, at midnight over on Adult Swim, and then turns up the very next day on Max.
On Adult Swim, is this going to be like a Harley Quinn type show where it's naughty from time to time?
It actually doesn't look that way. In fact, seriously, I want to suggest go check out the trailer, folks, because it great animation, but it's kind of, and in fact, what's kind of ironic is that it is Clark Kent, Lois Lane, and Jimmy Olsen all arriving in Metropolis. In fact, I guess Lois is working already at the Daily Planet, but Clark and Jimmy are just getting their foot in the door as interns. And isn't that really kind of the same story that Superman Legacy, the James Gunn thing, is supposed to cover? The early days of Superman's career in Metropolis?
I guess, from the casting, because it does look like a younger fella that's being rumored as the new Supes. So, yeah, I guess that would be accurate as well.
Well, speaking of which, though, that it's not just a rumor, I guess, at this point. Deadline is reporting that David Cornswet has been cast as Clark Kent, Superman, and Rachel Brosnahan is going to be playing Lois. And James Gunn confirmed this. Again, he's a guy who loves his social media, so he's on Twitter saying these two are not just incredible actors, but they're also wonderful people. So he's very, very much looking forward to working with them on Superman Legacy.
I don't know either of their names, so I'm very excited. So I can fall into a movie, and they can, that whomever that dude is, in my mind, he's going to be Superman. I don't have any other notion of him from anything. So it's like when I see Harrison Ford on the screen, I know that's Harrison Ford. And Harrison Ford gives a Harrison Ford kind of performance, which is great, but it's Harrison Ford. And so with these guys, I have no preconceived notions of who they are or what they're capable of. So I'm actually going to be able to fall into that movie and let it be what it is without any taint from my mind, which will be good. I like that.
Given how much I've enjoyed the Guardians trilogy, and likewise Gunn's Suicide Squad movie. It has a lot of flaky charm.
Yeah.
Very, very much looking forward to see what he does with Superman Legacy, or for that matter, what happens on the DC side of the street under his stewardship. And as you mentioned at the top of the segment, once we get on the other side of Blue Beetle and Aquaman, the Lost Kingdom and the like. So
I kind of have a feeling he's going to bring back the Boy Scout version of Superman. I don't know why. I just got that feeling.
That would be cool. That was kind of the fun of the Christopher Reeve one back in '78. So,
Yep.
All right, we said we would talk about Secret Wars on this part of the show. And again, as we mentioned, episode 2 of this 6-part limited series dropped today. Did want to circle back to Kobe Smulders. Can we now talk about this? Because people at this point have seen the first episode, so they know what happened to Maria Hill, right?
Well, I was just going to say they showed a coffin and I was pissed. But I guess now that you've said that, yeah. Okay, now here's the conundrum.
What?
Isn't she supposed to show up in the Marvels film? I think there's something that's filming at present that she showed up on set for. Which made me wonder one of two things. Either she gets the Tahiti treatment that Coulson got and comes back, or maybe the Marvels is not in the current time. I mean, it's off in the timeline a bit, where it comes out later, but it actually would take place before these events.
See, I do not know what to tell you, because Smolder got interviewed by the Hollywood Reporter after episode 1 dropped, and she talked about how when they brought her in to work on, the effect of, hey, we're thinking of doing Secret Invasion, and oh, by the way, what she said, look, I was told right away. Lou Esposito, the co-president of Marvel Studios, gave me a call to chat about joining up on Secret Invasion. And so, I've known about this for years. What startled her, though, is that this scene was shot in the middle of the pandemic at Peace Hall in Halifax, West Yorkshire, with dozens upon dozens of background artists and people involved in the production, and this news never broke.
Marvel PR team on the job.
Well, she goes, I was surprised that an image didn't leak. And she said, I guess that's a respect that Marvel has earned over the last decade, which is like the whole thing of, don't spoil it for people, and thankfully nobody did. But the interesting thing is Samuel L. Jackson was just recently interviewed about the production of Secret Invasion. And he brought up that while they were shooting, they had a drone fly over the set, which, and again, I had to share this story because of your constant refrain about the Marvel PR team with their laser-sighted guns, because they actually did shoot this drone out of the sky.
Oh man, the guy on the horn for that one has been waiting for that call. Tony, get your sniper gun. It's time. Oh, really? You're not kidding, are you, Charlie? No, it's time. We got a drone. Oh, yeah.
All right, but wait, it gets better. A second drone appeared over the set. Oh. And so like at this point, it's like, okay, we're following this back. And that's what they did. They followed it back to its launch site and met with the gentleman who was working the controls and explained in no uncertain terms that he was not allowed to use that footage and don't do this again. And
however, we do have a new sport called modern day skeet shooting where we use drones instead of clay pigeons.
That could well be. But all right, to circle, by the way, we did not touch on this topic, Secret Invasion related topic, on our last week's show. But since that time, there's been a lot of talk about how the opening credits, the stylized animation at the opening of this show, was done using AI, which upset a lot of artists associated with Marvel. Likewise, given, this is one of the key issues of the writer's strike out there, generated a lot of negative press there. What's interesting is Marvel Studios' pushback was, we deliberately chose this because of the theme of the show?
Hogwash.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so when I saw the opening credits, I went, ooh, that's ugly. And I didn't know why. But in all of the previous Marvel shows, the art has been impeccably beautiful, incredibly stylized. And this was just ugly. And I couldn't figure out why. And then when they said it was generated by AI, I was like, oh, that makes sense why it looks ugly. But then after that, it was... So did you just not want to pay artists or whatever? And I mean, they got a special effects, house to generate this, right? So there's somebody at the computer inputting data. Here's a picture of Sam. Here's a picture of a Skrull. Morph the two. So, I mean, yeah, there's someone kind of, doing work, quote unquote, to make it happen. So it's not like AI is really taking a job, but still, AI is not the theme of the show. Skrulls looking like humans is the theme of the show. So, yeah, I don't quite buy... honestly, I think they're just testing the waters of, can we get away with it? How much flack are we going to get? Well, if we, did an entire animated show with AI, then we would get booed, off the hill. So what if we just did opening credits and see if we get any flack? And if we don't get any, well, we could do a little bit more and kind of not talk about it. Yeah, I think that's dangerous ground, man.
Okay. I mean, I get what you're saying. I don't know if I would necessarily have described it as ugly. I mean, I get that's the thing. I have to admit, I have a fascination. If you go over to YouTube now, there seems to be this series of Wes Anderson directs Jurassic Park. Or Wes Anderson directs Lord of the Rings. And they are all, sort of weird exercises in, it's like, okay, that...
What can I do? What can I, they're looking for a new peanut butter and chocolate to mash together. Wes Anderson plus this. Wes Anderson plus that. I did see Asteroid City, by the way, over the weekend.
Oh, and?
It's the exact same feeling I had for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse was, it was beautiful artistry at its peak. And the story just brought me down because there was this existential dread in all the characters. And I mean, there were bright, funny moments that, I laughed so hard with when the alien showed up. Oh my God, it was so funny. But it was just, the whole movie was depressing in a weird sort of way. So yeah, and I just wasn't in the mood for being brought down. So I left out like, oh man. But it was peak Wes Anderson. And it's... probably one of his most Wes Anderson films, and that's great. And I'm sure when I'm in the mood, the proper mood to match that film, I'll be able to watch it again and enjoy it in that moment. But it just wasn't what I was looking for at that time. But speaking of the AI stuff, real quick, I did see, according to the New York Post, that Samuel L. Jackson has denied the use of his digital image after he passes. That he does not want anyone to be able to use his likeness. And then he said, oh, you guys are just worrying about that now? I was asked about this a long time ago. The first time I got scanned was for George Lucas for the Star Wars prequels. And I said, what's this for? And George and he said that they were friends. So we kind of had a laugh about it because I thought I was doing it because he had all these old guys in episode 1. So if something happened to him, he still wanted to put them in the movie. And so... Yeah, all the way back for episode 1, Samuel L. Jackson's been getting scanned. He says every single Marvel thing that comes along, I get scanned because there's a new costume, there's a new digital asset, there's a new toy, whatever. And so every single time he gets scanned, and he then goes on to say, ever since he did Captain Marvel, they did the Lola Project where they de-age him. And he goes, well, I guess they can do this anytime I want. And so for future actors, you should do what I always do when I get a contract. And it has the words in perpetuity and known and unknown in it. I cross that shit out. It's my way of saying, no, I do not approve of this.
Disney started using those contracts. And this goes all the way back to, do you remember the Peggy Lee suing Disney back in the day for, the money that was being made for selling Lady and the Tramp? She actually wrote the songs for Lady and the Tramp and was heavily featured in the actual promotion of the film back in 55 or thereabouts. And but the thing of it is that she got her one check for making the movie, because the movie was the product. But now here it was being released to theaters, and Peggy Lee was an older woman with limited means, and it's like, hey, I should be getting a cut of that. And Disney was like, oh, God, no. But they went to court, and it was one of these things where, in hindsight, Disney suing a little old lady who is now in a wheelchair did not work when it came to the sympathies of the jury, which awarded Ms. Lee a sizable check. And at that point, that's when Disney started putting that language into the effect of known and unknown technologies and into perpetuity. It's like, hey, pal, you got your check. Go away.
Right.
Pivoting back to episode 2 of Secret Invasion,
Yep.
Of course, great to see Rhodey. And I love the little, sort of throwaway, well, why aren't the Avengers involved here? Why aren't they dealing with the Skrulls? It's, oh, no, we don't want that.
Right.
Then people would copy them, and then they'd be accused of being terrorists. And it was like, wow, you handled that quite well. And in fact, to circle back to your Bob Iger, how do we keep the budget down? Oh, no, you can't use the Avengers. They would be, they'd be terrorists. So.
Well, this show in particular, it's like just chiming in my ear. Bob Iger is saying, cut some budget. Because first episode, they had the landing, the arrival of Samuel L. Jackson. It looks like it should be on a spaceship, but it's just bright light. You don't see any special effects or spaceship or anything. He's just in a field all of a sudden. And last couple of episodes, I mean, yeah, you get the transformation from Skrull to human, but mostly you've got just a lot of on-the-ground humans driving cars, talking. I'll tell you the scene in the bar with Rhodey and Fury, where Rhodey just dresses down Fury and he's like, you're fired. That whole scene I loved because Sam Jackson's character's been untouchable throughout this entire time. He's always been the peak of the pyramid, so to speak. And for Rhodey of all people to be in the position, be like, no, dude, you're out. And the way that he talked to him and the things that he said to him, I was like, damn, I was really surprised to see this in a Marvel project. It was really compelling, their conversation. And it was interesting to see where it puts Fury at the end of that conversation. It's like, oh, I didn't expect the toppling and the turns of this, per se. Because now he's like, if you're not the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. or you're not the head of S.W.O.R.D. or whatever it is, what do you got? What's your resources? What are you going to do? So yeah, it's interesting how this has progressed, and but again, the budget seems fairly straightforward so far.
Well, you wonder. We've got 4 more episodes of this to come, and it might just be a case of we're holding in reserve for the big set piece.
Oh sure, yeah.
But that said, I mean, the stuff that I think had the biggest impact, like you said, the dressing down by Rhodey. But did you, going into this, think we would get to meet Mrs. Nick Fury?
I never expected there to be a Mrs. Fury because, the Fury lifestyle doesn't allow for a dame kind of thing. Like he's always, on the job. It seemed like that was the character for so long, that the one focus, protecting the earth. And no, I was absolutely surprised. Now the question is, I want to find out what kind of woman is married to a guy like Nick Fury. Who can tolerate that man? And in the way that, he walks in, she's like, ain't you forgetting something? And he's got to put on the ring. And, it's like, I don't want to say the leash per se, but, he's like, I am trained to obey the wife. And so, yeah, I really would love to see more of the dynamic between that couple. I'm actually more interested in that than I am the Secret Wars right now, honestly.
Okay. Yeah. Well, all right. So that kind of brings us up to speed as to episode 2. And as I just mentioned, we got 4 more episodes with Secret Invasion, and going to be interesting to see how this story plays out. Because right now, as you mentioned, this is who is Nick Fury if he doesn't have all of S.H.I.E.L.D. at his back and the sort of resources he used to be able to tap into. And it's like,
well, maybe that's why he went home to his wife, and now we'll have a spinoff show called The Furies. It'd be like Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Okay. Let's not get into the Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie thing. No, I just read an amazing story over on Vanity Fair about why they separated, and holy cow, you don't want to go there.
Another show. All right.
Another show. Speaking of another show, we did not on this week's episode of Marvelous Disney discuss the Stan Lee documentary that's also on Disney Plus. But I promise, folks, next week's episode, Aaron and I will talk about that in depth. Which, again, well worth viewing, don't you think, Aaron? Or?
Oh, yeah, it was very, very good. And it was really nice to hear almost the entirety of everything told in Stan's own voice.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. I think that was the brilliant choice. That so it's like it's literally his story in his voice, and
even the bad parts, the things that we talk about with Kirby and all that, and the phone call they had over the air at the radio station. Oh my God, I can't wait to talk about that. But on the next show, we'll get into it.
On the next show. All right. But speaking of next show, what are you doing next on 32nd Street? Your great show, your podcast about Madison Avenue.
Well, this is the one that Disney Dish listeners may actually want to tune in for, because I have on the show Mr. Kurt Kamen. And Kurt lives in Tokyo, Japan, and he's a radio celebrity, does a morning show over there. But you may recognize his voice because he's the guy who tells you in English which line you need to get into at Tokyo Disneyland. Yeah, he's been the English-speaking voice of Tokyo Disneyland since the early 90s, I guess. So, yeah. So maybe we'll do a crossover show, and we'll have him on Disney Dish someday and talk about that kind of stuff, because we barely got to cover it.
Wow. Okay. No, that's an excellent suggestion. And seriously, folks, go check out that episode of 32nd Street and let me have a conversation with Mr. Testa. Maybe we can make that happen. Okay. Oh, speaking of Mr. Testa, I want to remind you folks that we do have some other podcasts here at the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network we'd like you to check out. We, of course, have Disney Dish, which I do with Len. We also have Fine Tuning, which I do with Drew Taylor, which, by the way, we're finally able to talk about how his Light the Fuse show, the great podcast about the Mission Impossible thing, that is now Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. And Drew is now working with Paramount.
Oh, my God.
We're working with grown-ups here, folks. Again, I've known this is in the works for months now, and doing my best to keep this secret. So it's so delightful to finally talk about it, and it's such a thrill that this happened for Drew and Charles, and it's going to be fascinating to see. I mean, they already get amazing stories, but it'll be fascinating to see who they get to talk to now with Paramount, kicking open the door for them.
Right.
Oh, and speaking of podcasts, we just recorded our brand new episode of Looking at Lucasfilm last night, myself and Brian Gahn, and we actually touch on when Tom Selleck was almost going to be Indiana Jones. So tune in for that one. Let's see. Beyond that, Aaron, social media, where can the nice folks find you?
Well, I can't use Twitter right now. I'm actually using smoke signals from the fires of Canada. Because Indianapolis has just completely been covered the last 2 days with smoke. Canadian smoke. It goes, oh yeah, eh? Smoke. Well, it's that a boot. But when I can clear the office of all the smoke and the haze, I'll go back on Twitter, and then you'll be able to find me at Azaprod, AZAPROD. Until then, I'm just using a wet blanket and blowing smoke back up in the air, going, help, help.
Yeah, when Nancy and I were driving out to Kansas City, the route took us down through Jersey and Pennsylvania, and at that point, that's where the smoke was mostly congregating, and it was bizarre. It was like hickory flavored fog.
Yeah,
I mean, it was you'd be out driving and you could see things disappearing like a half mile down the road, and it was just. I mean, we had to literally drive down into it from New Hampshire, and then when we finally drove out across Pennsylvania, it finally lifted and cleared. But holy cow!
My wife and I are currently affectionately referring to our neighborhood as Silent Hill.
Okay, stay indoors. Okay,
Yeah,
do not,
totally.
especially do not go out after dark. Anyway,
Yep.
Speaking of social media, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. Finally, if you could do Mr. Adams and I a favor, if you get head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and recommend, well, not only the show you're listening to right now, Marvelous Disney, but also 32nd Street. That would be very helpful. And if you really, really, really like what you heard here, if you want to head over to Bandcamp and subscribe, that would be cool too. That's going to do it for this week, but please come back next week, folks, when Aaron and I will do a deep dive on that fascinating Stan Lee documentary. But for now, thanks for listening.